Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm here to look ahead to Newcastle United's trip to Luton Town in the Premier League tomorrow as we speak. It's currently Friday morning around 11:30 as I record this, and just looking ahead to that game. We've heard from Eddie Howe this morning in his media briefing. 5 players are going to be checked on injury-wise: Anthony Gordon, Emil Kraft, Alexander Isak, who's apparently 50-50, and then Joelinton and Fabian Schär as well. Gordon obviously took that knock from that tackle by Caicedo and then came off and has looked like he needs a rest for a while. I think that's kind of the case for most players, though with the way that Newcastle are at the moment. Obviously, there's a 50-50 chance on Isak, as I've mentioned, with his groin problem that's persistent. It's minor but persistent and hasn't really gone away. I think he's needed a lot more rest than he's been able to get naturally. Schär and Joelinton scans apparently today to decipher whether they'll be able to fit to play. Glute issue for Fabian Schär came off against Fulham, and so did Joelinton with a hamstring problem. The prognosis is that Joelinton's injury is worse than Schär's, but both are not ruled out, so not too serious. And then there's Kraft who took a knock in the Chelsea game as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Kieran Trippier doesn't come back into the team, obviously for various different reasons. My last video did really well because I think lots of people noticed that I'd sort of, and in the comment section have said that I knew what was coming for Kieran Trippier against Chelsea. Obviously he came off the bench and made another mistake leading to a goal for Mudryk in the last minute, and then obviously missed his penalty in the shootout and Newcastle went out at the Carabao Cup. Let's just put that to bed. I didn't foresee that happening, but I just think generally that I sort of just alluded to it with the injury problems that Newcastle have got elsewhere, that players need rest when they can. And in the case of Trippier, he's the most important player that Newcastle have in terms of setting the tone off the pitch and on the pitch. I think he's so important. He's probably Newcastle's best signing in modern times. I can't count on two hands the amount of players that I've seen that are better than him in my lifetime at watching Newcastle United. So I think that he deserves a rest, and he's one of those players that, Newcastle are quite strong at fullback, and Tino Livramento, as I mentioned in that video, has done well. Obviously, he probably needs a rest. Everybody needs a rest, but when you've got a player who was 33 and was actually noted in the summer as a reason why Newcastle bought Livramento was to give Trippier rest when they could, I think he deserves and needs a time, maybe not weeks and weeks, but a time out of the team to really get back to his absolute best. Obviously, lots to talk about what's going on with him in his own personal life. I don't want to get into that because I honestly don't know. I think that he deserves time away from the first team for a little bit, just to recharge and get a bit stronger. But who knows? He's the type of person who will take things personally. He'll want to get out there and fix things. But so I wouldn't be surprised if he plays. But personally, as I say, I would continue to give him a rest and play Livramento at right back on Saturday at Kenilworth Road with Dan Burn at left back or Lewis Hall. I think I mentioned in the Chelsea video that the Lewis Hall situation was overblown by Eddie Howe's dealing of that question last week. He was asked again today and gave the answer that he should have done, which is that there are no doubts. The deal isn't officially sorted yet because the obligations haven't been met, but there's no doubts about him. He needs to develop a little bit. There are whispers, and I have heard from inside the club that there is a little bit of disappointment or surprise at the lack of development that he's gone on. But I think different players develop at different rates, and as I mentioned, he's been sort of lugged in with Tino Livramento, who's been superb for Newcastle. I think that's really unfair. So I think Hall is part of Newcastle's long-term plan. That should have been mentioned last week from Howe. I think that was poor from him in terms of managing that, which is very rare for Eddie Howe. He's usually brilliant with the media, but I think he made a misstep with that question, not answering it as he should. And then he corrected that today, and I think Eddie Howe has, the murmurings won't lose Hall to bed there, which is a very good thing, I think, for everyone involved. And then obviously, so Newcastle go into this game still licking their wounds a little bit, despite that win against Fulham. It's a very different story away from home to at home. They're very good at St James's. They struggle to get themselves into these games against teams away from home. They did that against Chelsea. I think that they really didn't deserve the victory on the balance of play. They did well to take the lead and defended very well. But I think, as I said, it's similar to PSG away and similar to so many games this season. If you sit back and invite pressure like that, eventually you get that much closer to the goal, you're eventually going to come unstuck, and you're inviting something like Trippier's mistake to happen, or a piece of magic to happen, or something, when you've got no time to respond. And I think that's kind of where Newcastle were on Tuesday, and they have been quite often away from home. Luton are very, very tough to play at Kenilworth Road. I think I think Rob Edwards has really done very well with them. He's the reason why Luton have so much hope of staying up this season. Kenilworth Road, they've not got the results that maybe some of their performances deserve. They were very, very unlucky to lose against Arsenal in the last minute to Declan Rice's header in that 4-3 game. It was a superb game. They took Manchester City all the way just after that as well. Tottenham, they caused problems, and Liverpool, obviously, they got a draw and probably should have won that game. So there's big teams have gone to Kenilworth Road and found it very difficult. And I think in that sense, Newcastle are quite vulnerable to what will be a very strong performance by Luton. They'll start fast, they'll look for intensity, and that's usually spelt bad news for Newcastle. So they've got to be a little bit cautious, Newcastle, going into this game. Newcastle can find their rhythm quite early on. I think that'll be crucial. I think the first 20 minutes will sort of dictate where this game goes. If Newcastle can stem the tide a little bit and then grow into it and find their feet and dominate the ball and dominate possession and dominate the chances, then I think they'll get the victory. But it is it's one of those games where they have to be very wary of what is a very tough game. Obviously, everyone's thoughts with Tom Lockyer after last week's game at Bournemouth for Luton, that'll be replayed after his cardiac arrest on the pitch. Really, really sad to hear about that, and hope he's gets better soon. But it's a huge game for Newcastle, this one, and I think if they can get the victory, it'll put them on 32 points and put them right back in that Champions League, and improve and build on that Fulham game. Then they can close the gap on the top four further with a home game against Nottingham Forest on Boxing Day. Obviously, Nuno Espirito Santo's in there. We'll get to that on Christmas Eve. I'll be about to preview that game. Also, I'm just putting a call out because I want to do a video on what I think Newcastle will do in January, the current situation at the club. Obviously, links with Dan Ashworth and Manchester United. I've got a little bit of information on that, so I'll do a little bit of a sort of update on that. And if you've got any questions for me for that video, a little Q&A, I'm happy to do that. So if you do have any questions, pop them down below in the comment section or tweet them at me at Harry de Cosmo, and I'll sure to answer those after Christmas, when there's finally a little bit of a break between Newcastle's games against Nottingham Forest and Liverpool on New Year's Day. And then obviously it's on to Sunderland as well in the FA Cup. Thanks very much for joining me again. I'll be back on Christmas Eve, as I said, to look ahead to the Nottingham Forest game and look back at what is hopefully a crucial victory for Newcastle in their race for the Champions League. It's been a very difficult few weeks with injuries, and obviously going out of 2 cup competitions in as many weeks almost is a really disappointing thing. But Newcastle are in a good space generally. Eddie Howe, there's a lot of talk about pressure, and I'll get into this on the video that I do next week. A lot of talk about pressure, and it's all coming externally. And there's a big January coming up, so lots to talk about. But I'll be back on Christmas Eve. Please continue to like, share and subscribe if this is the kind of content you like, and I'll see you then. Cheers.